Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This week I'm just going to touch really quickly on some living independently tips. I did get a question a couple weeks ago from a family who has a granddaughter that's about 18 years old, and they're looking for some tips on how to help her become more independent. I do want to stress to people, though, to please remember that everyone is different, and these are just my experiences. These are not what I'm telling people that they have to do. You also have to remember that I'm considered extremely high functioning. So, to answer the question, I guess I'm going to start back at the beginning, take you back again to when I was 19 and found out I had ACC. I just want to let people know that I am not perfect. I was not perfect then. I would say I was considered the black sheep of my family. I definitely was a troublemaker. I butted heads a lot with my father, who I have to say is very awesome. Love him to pieces. He is great, but back at this point of my life, I did not realize how great he was. So I had actually moved out of my parents' house against their wishes. And at that time, I had moved into my boyfriend's mother's house. And this boyfriend was also the best friend, who's a boy, that I have spoken of in a previous video. So I would say at that point I would consider myself not very independent at all. I really did make a lot of bad choices, and after a while he even bought a house and I moved into it with him. I really also at that time had a hard time holding down a job. I did usually consistently have a job. I just didn't really find any that interested me, so I didn't stick with them very long. And most of them were at like our local mall. When I did finally move out of the boyfriend's house and into a family member's house, in fact, at that point, I realized I needed to completely cut ties with this boyfriend, and it's kind of sad because at the same time, it was very conflicting because he was also my best friend since we were very little. And I guess sorry, I'm looking down at a paper again because I have a list. To start my independence, I'd say it started almost on a specific night when I realized that my life was going down a path that I really did not want it to be on. So I don't usually talk to people about this, but I want you to understand what it took for me to change and how attached to a person I had become. You see, this boyfriend of mine, who was someone who was my best friend since we were little, got very drunk one night, and he decided to drive home. And yes, my bad decision was to be in that vehicle with him. So it was just he and I, and he was driving down a back windy dirt road, and decided that he wanted to show me that no matter what, he always had control over the vehicle, which I asked him not to do. He did not listen, and he started going very fast down this road and swerved my side of the vehicle towards a bunch of trees. When those trees came within inches of my side of the car, I started to cry, and he laughed. And at that moment, that was when I knew that this life I was living was wrong. This was not the path that my parents intended me to be on. This was not the path I ever expected to be on. And that's when I realized that all these people around me were telling me for a while to get away from him, were actually trying to help me. So I would say that's the night that my independence started. So from there, some tips from my life to hopefully help you gain independence for yourself or for your ACCer would be, let's see, first of all, I think you really need to help them gain more opportunities. For myself, I did this on my own, where there was a horse barn down the road, and I have trouble, well, not anymore, but I used to have trouble speaking with people to their faces. I would get very embarrassed, or I didn't know what to say. So I wrote them a letter and put it in their mailbox about how I really liked horses and I knew a lot about them and did they need help. So they ended up responding back, and I started on that great journey of working for them at the horse barn, which was a great opportunity for me. I taught a lot of independence because I had to care for these horses on my own, feed them, brush them, clean their stalls. I even actually started training a few of them. Another way to help gain independence is to teach them how to rent. And what I mean by that is I actually, after living with this boyfriend and having that incident, I moved out into my oldest sister's house, and she did not baby me. She gave me opportunities to become more independent. I had to pay rent, so I always had to have a job because I had to pay her rent every month. At the same time, there were no excuses. She also made up a calendar every month that had her chores and my chores on it, and they had to be done. Another thing for helping to gain independence that also goes along with the renting was to have them make their own meals. When I rented at my sister's house, she wasn't making me food. I had to make breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Even if it was very simple, like toast and scrambled eggs, I had to make that. And then at one point I did move out to renting a place of my own, and I had to make my own food there. And I will admit it was mostly popcorn and baked potatoes, but they were my favorite things to eat. And there were other things in there, but that's what I did, and I didn't need anyone else's help. I would also encourage them to try different jobs. I was super nervous about becoming a substitute teacher at one point, and that's what my mother encouraged me to do, was to get into subbing. And I'm so glad that I did finally listen to her, because I loved being a substitute teacher, and then that led me into becoming a full-time one-on-one teaching assistant with special ed, and it was just an amazing experience, and I really hope to go back to it. I stopped only because we had kids, and I really enjoy being a stay-at-home mom until my youngest is in kindergarten. Last, I really think you need to teach them to be more outgoing. Have them try to speak up more when trying to get a job or trying to make friends. My husband had actually also mentioned small things like going to the grocery store, and maybe you could give them like part of a list, or even just one thing, and say, in the next aisle is some bread that we need. Can you go grab the bread? Give them small opportunities to become independent, because if you, and I know being a parent, it's very hard to let them go. If you don't let them become independent, they can't learn. And I even did say to my father once, because he said to me, he was upset with me because I was being so dependent, and I said to him, but do you realize you're not letting me make mistakes to become independent? I can't be independent if you don't let me. So sometimes just letting go of a bit of the control helps. I know that my parents were a bit nervous when I took a trip out to see my other best friend when she was going to Notre Dame University for college. I drove out there 8.5 hours by myself, and I guarantee you my mother was a nervous wreck, but they let me go. And since then I have done many, many more trips on my own, or even just with my own girls. Even today, just a few hours before taping this, I just came back from a trip of a few hours away that I took my girls to for the weekend. And then thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget at the end of the video to give me a thumbs up and like it. And everyone in New York State, I just want to remind you to please go to www.alittlebitofsprinkles.com and sign up for our regional meeting that's coming up this July. The more people we get, the more it benefits everyone, and it would be really great for everyone to make new friends. So please remember that this disorder does not define you. You define this disorder.